You know I don't feel that way, team. Yep. Good morning, everyone. We will start the meeting with a karakia, please.
Please stand, everyone.
E te atio ka rawa, horahia mātou I tō aroha me tō rangi māri, arehi mātou I rungi te tika me te pono, ke kore e kōtiti I roto I tēnei ao hurihuri. Ko koe te tumuaki, ko koe tō mātou peringa, anei mātou e tuku aroha, tuku whakamoemiti, ki a koe E rungi te ingoa tō mātou kai whakaora, mo ake pai māri. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. Morena tātou. Good morning and welcome. We've got a pretty big agenda today, but that's the way it is. We have some apologies. I have an apology from Margaret for lateness, I believe, and Angela is away. So 2 apologies. Move that the apologies be received. Thank you, Councillor Gallagher.
My apologies, Paula. If the meeting goes on after 5, I will have to depart. I have another council engagement.
So do I, actually. So
depending on,
let's not.
Depends on what Jeff says. So with the hex.
He's not going to say anything at all. Thank you very much, Mark. Someone move that apologies be accepted. Oh. Rightio. Thank you.
And do we have any councillors joining by
Zoom? We do have 2 councillors on Zoom. We have Sarah and Kesh at the moment. We'll just do something with technology.
We're having some technology issues. We'll get that sorted very shortly. They are here.
Waipa people, you did not hear that. We are not having technology issues. Waipa are with us today to look at how we run our live streaming and other bits and pieces.
Oh dear.
Welcome here. So apologies have been moved by Councillor Gallagher, seconded by Councillor Taylor, Deputy Mayor Taylor. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. The agenda is as it is, noting that after public forum we will be moving out of open agenda into the closed agenda for a period of time dealing with the Chief Executive performance matters. It won't be a long meeting.
The notice of motion has been removed from the agenda.
Oh yes, and noticing that, please, that we have removed the notice of motion on the road renaming.
Can I just clarify that, please? As part of, through the Chief Executive, we a situation where there's a resolution of council that stands. There's a proposed notice.
Martin, no, we're just removing it, and
I'm
going to take it offline for the next set of process.
Yeah, but what I want to ask before we expend a lot of public money and resources in terms of another survey or whatever, just is it going to come back to elected member session before we do anything? You know, I just want to work out process, totally, at the end you have a democratic, but at the moment I just want to get assurance from Richard Brigg we'll be doing nothing until we've had an elected member session and no resources to do, because at the moment a resolution stands.
Martin, you don't need to hear from Richard that, because I've already decided in removing it for those very reasons that we need further elected member dialogue about it, a conversation about it, and we need to understand the process. So that's why it's being removed, in part.
No, that's fine, and I would suggest that it come back to an EM session.
Yes, absolutely, agree, 100%.
But I'd like to have a budget for nothing, thank you.
But the key question I have is just give me the assurance we're not going to go out and do a whole consultation until we've discussed it. Okay, fine.
No,
thank you.
Absolutely.
That's fine. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So given those changes to the agenda, someone move that the agenda be received. Councillor Van Oost and Councillor Bunting, all in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? No, being none.
No, I do have one that I would note that I warmly commend the retiring member for Hamilton West, Tim McIndoe. This is serious. I think he's done a fantastic job, and obviously wish the 2 incoming constituent MPs all the best.
Yeah, thank you. Good note. Not really a declaration of interest,
no,
but a good note. And you're absolutely right. We acknowledge the community service, the good community service of Tim McIndoe, and wish him the best, because I'm absolutely sure he'll still be a really good advocate for the city in some other way. And congratulations, as you say, Martin, to the two successful candidates, Gaurav Sharma and Jamie Strange. And we're looking forward now to the next step when government tells us how they've, money, yeah, that would be good, when government gives us some money. But also when we understand the positions of leadership, the cabinet ministers and so on, so we can start to rehab our conversations or pick up our conversations that we had before the elections. Okay, no declarations of interest. We're going to move to the public forum. We've moved the agenda. We're moving to the public forum, and then remember that we're going to briefly go into a public excluded for matters relating to Chief Executive.
You just jinxed it.
What? Who jinxed it?
Briefly going into public excluded.
Oh, all right. No, it
We'll
won't.
see you tonight.
Okay, so public forum, please. Who's first on?
So our first speaker is Peter Finlay, speaking to item 19, Development Contributions Policy.
Good morning, Peter. Oh, yeah.
Well, given I don't have a lot of time here, you can ask me who I am after I say what I've got to say. Look, so I'm just really referring to the development contribution policy, as Becca mentioned. There was a circulated short update entitled Growing Hamilton back in September, 25th of September. And I think what we see here before us today is a little bit of a surprise to me that it's kind of come along so soon. I wasn't really aware there were any time frames. As I understand it, the Growing Hamilton update responds to a meeting with elected members in early September, and they had to desire to investigate a range of options which I've outlined in my two. And as I say, yesterday I had a look, became aware of Stafford Hodgson's report on the DC policy options, and I wanted to comment on his work. I think it would be fair to say in my four that my responses are informed by the following comments and assumptions, and I'll just take you through those. One, that we're in a COVID-influenced world, and that will prevail for at least the next 3 years. The accepted place of work, generally accepted place of work includes a new normal where greater reliance is placed on the use of home for work, with less placed on the accepted place of work pre-COVID-19. It's likely to be a shot in the arm for the CBD if a higher level of intensification occurs on land in close proximity to the CBD, particularly if it's of a design and build quality that aligns with the values sought by the city. All development is not considered equal when it comes to location, influences on wellbeing, amenity, emissions, demands placed on transport infrastructure, and support of the CBD. Again, if well devised, this development contribution policy framework provides one of the few tools that Council has to incentivise development that is likely to influence the delivery of such outcomes referred to above. I failed to see the magic and compelling appeal of the Frankton area earmarked for remission at the exclusion of other areas considered fringe CBD and which have a residential intensification zoning. Similarly, I do not see why high-rise apartment projects and projects of scale are not incentivised in fringe CBD areas. My view is also that aggregation of land could be readily encouraged and incentivised to produce development of scale, design and amenity attributes sought by the city. I didn't quite complete that sentence. The level of certainty that prevails suggests it is prudent to be risk-averse with new development contribution components such as the community infrastructure project component. And it's desirable in policy for development contribution policy to lead, inform and anticipate the direction of the district plan in response to the direction of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and other influences. That outside of the district plan, the primary technique or vehicle available to influence in design and built form is the urban design panel, and if accepted, greater use of this panel or its successor should be made available to incentivise design, built form and amenity outcomes. So when I take you to my table, I think that just captures, so what I've tried to do there is basically taken Stafford's report as the template and just really made some comments, inserted those in the template so you can easily see what I'm trying to say. So if you look at social outcome, housing provisions, I'm basically saying, well, that's for council to decide. That's in your court. Extend the CBD remission, basically I support it. Begin charging community infrastructure. I'm saying this is for a broader submission by the wider public, but at best, identify it perhaps, but don't implement until post-recovery of COVID-19. The Frankton area remission, partly support it, basically asking the question what's special about the Frankton area. I'm suggesting that the fringe CBD be included. It aligns, and hopefully to align with some of the direction of the urban development directions around some enabling of development within 1K of the CBD. So I'm suggesting that the residential intensification zone, in other words, areas already marked for intensive development, be included. High-rise building remission. Yep, cool. I'm saying I don't see any risk to council, very little risk of introducing 100% DC remission for CBD and CBD fringe with 4 or more levels. And I'm basically saying 4 or more because there's been very few with 4, and of course you guys can model that to see what 4 could mean or has meant in the past, and also to allow a car park level that anticipating the direction of the urban development directions, saying you don't actually have to provide one, but it might be better for council if car parks are provided. So I'm assuming that can be a level. The Urban Design Advisory Panel remission, again, I disagree with what the report says. I think it's one of the few tools that council has to, if you like, address its concerns around design, and that I'm basically saying recalibrate that panel, allow it to be expanded to include accredited architects, and it may be perceived that that's prone to abuse, but I think the professional reputational damage, as I see, will control recommendations, and at the end of the day you've got 3 of them. So I'm saying, my suggestion is that the Urban Design Panel advisory, so recommendations of theirs be eligible for a further DC remission of 33%, but once you're in, you're bound. Fringe CBD, I'm saying, well, all of this, you can cap your level of remissions, but also include incentives to aggregate land. That's it in a snapshot.
Actually, it was a very clear and very useful snapshot. The way you've set it out and paragraphed it makes all your points very clear, and I appreciate the work that you've put into it. Councillors, just a reminder, because there is a process around development contributions, legal process, that you may ask questions for clarity, but we're not getting into any discussion or debate on this matter whatsoever. And there is a difference between the questions that you can ask for Peter and later of staff when we progress this. So these are questions directly to understand Peter's points. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Peter, thanks for your very clear submission. Just in terms of the high-rise buildings, your views on remissions there, the report points out the fact that it's expensive to do, and no one's gone anywhere near doing that really recently. Do you think a full DC remission there could actually make a significant difference? Do you think it would be enough to move the dial, or?
Yes, look, I think so.
And why?
Yes, look, I draw your attention to the fact that you'll be aware BBO are in Little London Lane, that high rise of 5 levels plus 1. That was a project that I initiated with my partners back in '85. Pre-87 crash, we had it approved by a body of council just like this, where we could come and present our, if you like to haves, which is basically greater site coverage, height, parking in the basement. It was granted, we did it. We came to an arrangement with a subsidiary of Chase called Petron, which underwrote, and we underwrote part of the risk. And anyway, those are complex arrangements. We did that. And basically after that, so when we sought a development partner, we interviewed virtually every building company in the country, Hawkins, right, Fletcher's right through. And basically when we got ours up, there was a whole had a cascade effect on, it set the scene for the KPMG tower, the Norris Ward McKinnon one and the like, and it's a norm now. So somebody has to take the risk, but it's always a good thing if it's incentivised in some way. And I think because it's, especially along the river, there's some engineering constraints, much higher cost of construction. It's where you get the greatest amenity and level of well-being, in my view. How are you going to get that?
So you're saying this could start that process?
Yeah, it could. And
of others following suit?
That's right, I think so.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Peter.
I'm only going to allow one question each because of time, sorry.
No, all good.
Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, and thanks, Peter, for the very clear and concise submission. Would you see this report as a bit of a starter as we head into the long-term plan, that it could bring together in a consultative process developers and investors who would not only look at DCs as a lever, but other levers that we might have to see, as you've already alluded to in the response to the Deputy Mayor, that, as to what happened in 1985, rather than this being a straight decision that would be expected to make today.
I think the DC policy template, if you like, to me it lacks sophistication, and it's best to go in as go out in as developed form as possible, because it sets the scene for debate, and it's best to set the scene for debate in the most informed way. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't think it's developed with enough, it doesn't have enough maturity to go out. I think it would be better to put some more work in before that happens.
And do you think that...
No, Rob, sorry, I'm just going to move.
I was just a follow-on to that. That there are other, which Peter hasn't answered, and that there are other levers that council should be considering apart from DCs to try and incentivise, growing Hamilton and affordable housing and so forth.
Yes, I think so. I think, look, you have few levers ahead of the district plan review, and I think your design panel is one of them, and it's underutilised. It'll be given a lot more power. And I think you can get growth with the right framework. And I think if you give some weight to the design panel, so that it becomes a lot more mandatory, that the developer can call on, I think that would be useful alongside a really well-designed development contribution policy framework.
Okay, thank you. And we invite you to share some more of those ideas with us. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. In your report, you talk about incentivising land aggregation, and I'm romanticised by that idea, but you haven't given examples of how we might do that, given the complex land holdings and structures and things.
Well, I think you can encourage it. Basically, you can say, well, okay, you can look at your modelling and just say, okay, basically ask the modelling to reveal what land holdings are there above 800 square metres, 1,000 square metres, etc., right? You can test it. And you test it, get those outcomes, you say, well, okay, what we really would, it just kind of makes sense that you can get better utilisation of land, probably better amenity within it because you've got scale, if you have greater parcels of land. So you can say, well, okay, do that testing, encourage it by saying, well, land holdings over 1,100 square metres, 1,200, 1,500, whatever it might be, you get these benefits.
Okay,
You have a suite of benefits.
thank you, and that's
And
also,
can I just add one thing I didn't answer to Councillor Pascoe? At the moment, there's the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. There's some required responses in certain timeframes, but there's also a requirement to give consideration to it. It would be great if council could tell the development community what that means
okay.
and interpret that, and I think that would be a really useful lever for growth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah's gone away with her question, so that's okay. Okay, that's fine. All right, so thank you very much, and you know, it's very clear presentation, and you've raised some areas for further consideration, conversation, so we'll no doubt be iterative.
Thinking, I hope.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I didn't eject you from the seat of loud, you know, I didn't eject you from the seat on 5 minutes. Thanks. Next is Thomas. I also won't eject you, but we do need to keep reasonably to time. Good morning.
Morning. Kia ora koutou, I'm Thomas Gibbons. I'm here on behalf of Property Council to talk about two topics. One of them is development contributions and one of them is growth. With the DCs, we were quite interested as an organisation in seeing this paper because the paper that went to councillors has quite a number of different ideas in it, and one of the key points I want to get across to you is that DCs are not really an incentivisation tool, or shouldn't be used as an incentivisation tool. They are a cost recovery tool for infrastructure, and we encourage a lot of caution about treating them as a tool to incentivise things. There are other tools, coming back to Councillor Pascoe's question before. Definitely the district plan can regulate and incentivise particular kinds of development in particular areas, the rating system to some extent, but picking out particular areas to incentivise through DCs does become a difficult exercise. One of the ways one of our members described it is it's like using a dog control bylaw to regulate where playgrounds go. It's kind of an unrelated sort of tool. There is a comment that's really interesting in Frankton, and I will comment that Frankton as an exception looks quite anomalous there, but there's a comment that lower development contributions raise development feasibility, which will incentivise more development. And that's absolutely true. Lower DCs do incentivise more development, and that's not just true in Frankton, that's true across the whole city. I did absolutely want to touch on the importance of incentivising development when we have a housing shortage still in the city and the region. Development is good, but it's also important to recognise that development does not create growth. Development responds to growth. So we need to build more houses because our city is growing. It's not simply that demand on infrastructure is something that developers create for their own sake. Demand on infrastructure rises because Hamilton's a great place and more people want to live here. So development is a response to growth, not a leading indicator of growth. There is a comment in the paper, paragraph 6 and 7, that the idea that growth should pay for growth has been tweaked into those who benefit from growth should pay a fair share of that growth. And absolutely that's on a better track than the idea that growth should pay for growth, because as I've said, development is a response to growth, not a leading indicator. So definitely very keen to see more tweaks to that idea, and important for councillors to understand and reflect on what growth actually is and what it's led by. And we can have population growth through more children, through migration, through COVID with people returning from overseas to live here. All these kinds of factors can drive growth. Tying this together into growth, it's fascinating and concerning that there's a recommendation that councillors go with the low growth projections for Hamilton, but I haven't seen the full NIDEA report, but I'll first of all make the comment that Hamilton has been recognised as a high growth area in the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. I make the comment that there's a very good history book on Hamilton which says the story of Hamilton is a story of growth, constant growth. I will reflect that we're still a relatively young city demographically, and that growth is likely to continue. We're a great city. People want to live here. People are going to move here internally from other places in New Zealand. It's a great place to live. We have a great economy. We have convenience to so many things. And we as an organisation would very much encourage medium, if not high growth projections, because that is an important part of future-proofing this city. I recognise that lower growth projections can be convenient, but ultimately they're not good planning and they lack aspiration for the city. We have a lot of aspiration as an organisation for the city, and we'd really like to see council tracking towards much higher growth and not relying on low growth projections. So I've covered DCs and some of the concerns there about it being used as an incentivisation tool, and I've also talked about growth and strongly encourage you to aim for higher growth projections. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That was also very clear and easy to follow, so appreciate that. I've got a couple of quick questions with the same proviso that I had before about where they're going. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, if I may, two quick, pertinent, succinct, brief questions. Thanks, Thomas, for your presentation. You referenced CBD as not really being a good incentive for development, but obviously we've been using it as a tool in the CBD over the last 10 years with some degree of success. So I just saw your comment on the CBD specifically.
Yes, so first of all, the concern I expressed is about using DCs generally as an incentivisation tool. I think among our members there have been mixed views on the CBD remission. I suspect the balance of opinion would be those remissions have played a valuable role in revitalising the CBD. I think they have made a difference, but that's not a universal view among all members.
No, fair comment. And just in terms of what you mentioned, other things in the district plan we can use instead of DCs, and we've heard that a few times. What explicit elements of the district plan would you suggest we could use better?
That's a very big question, which I couldn't easily answer succinctly, but what I will say is that development responds to the framework created by the district plan. So we see all these duplex developments all around the place because they are enabled by the plan. What else could be enabled by the plan? Many things. There could be an ability to have a more empowered urban design panel, which allows less rules to apply for good, well-designed developments. An empowered urban design panel could make a huge difference to getting the right sort of development happening. We do need a district plan which is very focused on density and intensification, while also balancing that with greenfields growth, because I think we need that too. Hamilton is growing, and the work done by Regional Housing Initiative and so on is emphasising there is still a big shortage of housing in this area that needs to be addressed, and the only way that's going to be addressed is through development.
Okay, I'm just going to take questions that are up on the board, and then we're going to move on. So there's Councillor McPherson followed by Councillor Wilson, and then we will be moving on. Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
It's gone.
No, sorry.
Only pressed it. That's so cool then. That's okay. We'll go to Councillor Wilson.
For me, yeah, Mayor Paula. Thomas, thanks for your your succinct commentary. I'm wanting to explore your narrative about who's responsible for who's driving growth, whether it's the developers or whether it's Hamilton as a popular, livable city and people wanting to come along. And I think somewhere in the middle lies the truth. It's a bit of both, because, and so my question is, you know, going forward, do you see ratepayers having to pay for the demand created by developers, or would you prefer us as a city not to invest in infrastructure, particularly where that infrastructure produces a very low return on investment? So there are some areas that, you know, on the face of it, you wouldn't necessarily want to invest because the rate of return for the amount of usable lots is extremely high, but we're being driven by developers who happen to own that area versus other areas which is more convenient for us and less cost intensive, and we get a better return on investment, more pieces of land. So I'm just trying to understand that nuance.
I probably can't answer that nuance entirely succinctly, but I'll give some examples. If we imagine a new subdivision that costs some money in infrastructure but creates 100 or 1,000 new lots, that's 100 or 1,000 new ratepayer units. And the long-term benefit to that of the city of having those rates paid year after year after year is in many members' views, far greater than the cost of DCs or of infrastructure going in the first place. There's a long-term benefit to increasing the ratepayer base because the overall cost of running Hamilton as a city is spread among more people. It's not a simple higher rates or higher DCs equation, zero-sum equation. It's certainly more nuanced than that, because growth, in a sense, does pay for itself over time. The second comment I'd make there is that identifying the rate of return on infrastructure is fraught with difficulty sometimes. And I would give the example of Auckland, which has, in many ways, underinvested in infrastructure. There were comments in the 80s, maybe 70s, about city connections to the airport and so on. They would have been much cheaper if they'd been done then, and doing them now costs a lot more. So aiming for infrastructure that will go the distance and last through growth is better than cutting corners at the time. That's a difficult decision, I understand politically, to say to people we need to invest in the future and that's going to cost you now. But that's a very important decision for the city to make, so it doesn't come up against the infrastructure constraints that drive places like Auckland. We have an opportunity to address those.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those views, and from the sounds of it, there's a lot more conversation to have, and that's good. Thank you both for coming in and talking with us this morning. We appreciate it.
I was going to ask a question, given that Councillor McPherson had removed his
well, make it super quick.
I was going to a much shorter question than Councillor Wilson's one.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas. When I read Report 18, which is the one on growth predictions, I sense from it that we're trying to get some objective evidence around evidence that will help us in the long-term plan estimate future growth. And you're suggesting we're using the wrong evidence. Do you have evidence that we could use that would help us add this to the Nydia low and let us resolve, you know, where we think growth might go, given your members are really well and truly at the coalface with growth and development?
So, thank you for the question. I haven't seen the Nydia report that's referenced here. I'm expressing the concern that it's happened before, that there is a temptation to focus on low growth or low projection of growth because it allows less infrastructure to be funded. And without seeing the report, I can't compare it to other reports, and I'm certainly not a demographer myself. But what I am encouraging is that there's a really close look at that and whether a medium or high growth projection is in fact more appropriate for the city, because it is a city that grows.
There will be no more questions. I know that will disappoint a couple of councillors, but this is public forum. It's at my discretion to allow it to run over time, and I have allowed it to run over nearly 10 minutes for each. So, but what I will say is that this isn't the last conversation, and nor should it be the last time that we talk with the development community, and we welcome the sharing of views. Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks Thomas, thanks Peter. We're going to now move, of course, into public excluded for a while. Mike, I would suggest we'll probably be about 20 minutes to half an hour, if you want to grab a coffee. Thanks. Let's move to exclude the public, moved by me, and Councillor Wilson is the seconded. Councillor Me. Okay. Okay, sorry about that, Councillor.